The Protestant Reformation is something which I think is highly dependent on the appalling behaviour of Leo X, the Pope, the Medici Pope, who is only slightly better than the Borgia Pope Alexander VI. And both were squalid in their self-indulgence. Both helped directly to usher in the Renaissance, but they also ushered in this rebellion that becomes the Protestant Reformation and splits the church. Now, what I find so fascinating is once you start looking at the texts, you can see that however well-intentioned Luther might have been, he was perverting the reality and he was twisting the words. If you start looking particularly at things like grace and good works and his obsession with sola fide. Sola fide asserts that humanity is justified before God solely through faith in Jesus Christ, apart from any works of the law. It's founded on a verse in Romans, logizometha ga dikustai piste anthropon choris ergon nomu. For we hold that one is justified by faith, piste, apart from the works of the law. And then in Ephesians, tega chariti esti sesomeni diapisteos, for by grace you have been saved through faith. And it then goes on, and this is not your own doing, it's the gift of God, not a result of works, so that you may not boast. But in the Epistle of James, which Luther famously dismissed as an epistle of straw because of its apparent contradiction with Paul, or because it didn't fit in with his sola fide thing, it writes, James 2:24 writes, orate oti ex ergon dikaute anthropos, ke ugek pisteos monon. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And the tension there is not, I think, semantic nitpicking, it's a theological physio. Paul and James are addressing slightly different problems. Paul criticizes reliance on Torah observance for salvation, while James is criticizing a dead faith, a notional belief accompanied by moral action. Luther's rebellion, therefore, was not was doctrinal, but he was twisting the doctrine to support his ethical revolt against clerical decadence, particularly that of Pope Leo, Giovanni de' Medici, the lavish patron of the arts, the financier of St. Peter's Basilica, through the sale of indulgences, a spiritual pyramid scheme. Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, arguably the most corrupt pontiff in history, notorious for nepotism, simony, and fornication. Their behaviour catalysed Luther, who saw in that corruption a betrayal of the gospel, and he famously protested against indulgences in his 95 Theses in 1517, posting on the door of the church in Wittenberg in reaction to the selling of salvation to fund architectural magnificence. But in Jewish thought, if you go back, grace, chesed, and faith, emunah, are not alien, though they are framed communally and covenantally, not individualistically. So in Habakkuk 2:4, tzaddik ber emunato yechye, but the righteous shall live by his faithfulness. This verse is the Old Testament root of Paul's doctrine of justification by faith. But in the Talmud, the same word, emunah, implies trust, loyalty, and ethical consistency. In Makot 24a, the sages explain Habakkuk came and established the commandments, the mitzvot, upon one principle, as it stated, the righteous shall live by his faith. Here, emunah is not mental assent, but relational, but a reciprocity within the community, a relational trustworthiness, a lived fidelity to the covenant of God. So faith is a work in the Jewish sense. It embodies a mode of being, not a mere profession. And I find that sort of exciting and humbling. This Talmudic idea: the righteous shall live by their faithfulness. Salvation is covenantal and ethical, not transactional. So Paul stresses justification apart from works. James emphasizes that authentic faith is inseparable from works, and the Talmudic view sees works as intrinsic to what faith means in a Jewish covenantal context. Faith for Judaism is not some abstract belief, it's manifest only in the mitzvot, in the works that that people effectively do, or in the works that people perform. And the real problem is that Martin Luther distorts the text. Romans 3:28. He says, a person is not justified by works of the law, but by faith alone. But actually, that word "alone" isn't in the Bible. That word has been added by Martin Luther in 1533 to support his sola fide idea. The original Greek doesn't have it. It says we can see that a person is justified not by works of the law, but by faith. And it perfectly aligns with James 2:24, this epistle of straw, which says that a person is justified by works and not faith alone. And actually, all you have to do is go back to Matthew 7:21, where Jesus says, "Not everyone who calls upon me, Lord, Lord, will be saved, but only those who do the will of my Father." The only thing that really genuinely demonstrates the depth of one's faith is what one does. And so Luther forced his case, but in the end it's Leo the X and these scurrilous overindulgent popes, Leo the X and Borgia, who provide the impulse for Protestantism, and then Luther scurries around trying to find evidence to support his position, I think. I'd be very interested to know what you think about this, but I was just thinking about it, about the importance of the papacy over history and how it changes things. So we've got the Protestant Reformation, and this year the anniversary of the Council of Nicaea in Iznik, just down the road from Istanbul, and a place that the late Pope Francis, was indeed due to visit for that commemoration. And I'm not sure when the commemoration will take place. I think it's relatively soon. But again, it's something which is slightly overlooked in Turkey. There's very little reference to it. And in Iznik, there is a plaque on the wall commemorating the Seventh Ecumenical Council, which is significant in its own right. But the First Ecumenical Council, it's sort of overlooked. And that is one of those events that defines not only modern Christianity, but Western culture in a seismic way in 325 AD. Words matter, and when you start twisting words around to suit your political aim, you have a short-term life there with that. But in the end, the lie comes back to haunt you, because you can't twist words to mean something that they don't originally mean, and then does the whole bowl of cherries fall as a result? No, because Martin Luther's impulse is based on other things as well. But I think his sola fide position is an over-egged omelette. There we are. That's me.